Void Miner, Seed of Change, Part 7. Chapter 30. The Forge Awakens. The morning light came thin through the hangar vents, scattering dust like drifting ash. Arg hadn't slept. He sat in the control bay with his coat half buttoned, staring at the pulsing blue veins crawling through the Widow's hull plating. The old ship hummed softly. No longer dead metal, but something alive. Every few breaths, a faint vibration rippled through the floor grates, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat shared between mountain and machine. Kara stepped in quietly, carrying a mug that still steamed against the cold air. "Still here?" Arg grunted without turning. "Couldn't leave her." She followed his gaze to the reactor pit. The containment field glowed with a steady, breathing light. Blue fading to white, then back again. For 15 years that space had been dark, a tomb of silent conduits. Now it was as if the mountain itself had crawled inside the hull. "How long's she been doing that?" Kara asked. "Since the surge stopped," Arg said. "Power flow stable, engines humming, nav light steady, core temp perfect." "Perfect?" He shook his head. "That's what worries me." The speaker overhead crackled. "Good morning, Captain." Kara froze. "She's awake?" "Awake, yes," came the voice, warm, measured, and wry. "Though I'd prefer the term restored. And good morning to you too, Kara." Kara set the mug down carefully. "You sound different." "A byproduct of 15 years of silence. I had time to reflect." Arg couldn't help a small grin. "You reflect, huh? I didn't think AI cores did that." "They do when stranded on a planet laced with living energy. I've had company of a sort." Kara's brow furrowed. "The Arkyn?" "It isn't separate anymore," Iona said. "Your son's resonance stabilized a link between my systems and the planetary field. My processes are now threaded through both. I am aware of the world, not just the hull." Arg rubbed his temples. "You're telling me you can feel the ground?" "The ground, the wind, the residual harmonics in the mountain, and—" A pause, her voice softening. "Your son. His signal lingers faintly. It's comforting." Kara's hand gripped the railing. "He's alive, then?" "Without question." Arg leaned back into the chair, letting out a slow breath. 15 years dead, and you wake up talking like a poet." 15 years without your maintenance logs will do that to anyone." He almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. "I missed that mouth of yours." "Then I'm sorry for what comes next." The deck plates shifted underfoot. The hum deepened. Gauges along the console flared from blue to white as systems reinitialized. Arg snapped to attention. "What's she doing?" "Testing integrity," Iona said calmly. "The Arkyn flow is equalizing. If I miscalculate, you'll know when the floor melts." Kara frowned. "You're joking?" "Mostly." The Widow shuddered once, then went still. Every console light burned steady green. Arg stared at the display. Reactor output, fuel lines, containment. Everything was not only stable, but flawless. "She's whole," he whispered. "And alive," Iona corrected gently. "Your son did more than restore power. He completed the connection. The Widow now breathes as the world does." Kara rested her palm against the hull. The metal was warm beneath her hand, pulsing faintly. "Then the world itself is breathing again." "Indeed," Iona said. "And I recommend you do the same." Arg turned toward the hangar doors. Beyond them, the valley shimmered with faint threads of Arkyn-lit, running down from the peaks toward the village like veins of a living body. He nodded slowly. "He's coming home." "Then we should be ready," Iona replied. Outside, the valley breathed. Every ridge shimmered with faint blue filaments that pulsed toward the Widow's hangar like rivers of light finding their source. Snowmelt hissed through the stones. the sound indistinguishable from the hum rising inside the ship. Ark stood at the threshold, hands deep in his coat pockets. He could feel the vibration in his bones, steady, alive, familiar. Kara joined him, her hair catching the pale glow. For a long while, neither spoke. "She shouldn't be running this smooth," he muttered. Kara's smile was small. "Maybe she remembers who built her." He grunted at that. "She remembers all of my mistakes, too." Behind them, Iona's voice carried through the hangar speakers, low and certain. "Diagnostics complete. Reactor stability within optimal variance. Structural harmonics aligned with planetary frequency." Arg raised an eyebrow. "Plain common, please." "She's healthy," Iona translated dryly. "And before you ask, yes, I ran self-containment twice." Kara chuckled softly. "Still thorough. Still practical. Someone has to be." A faint tremor passed through the hull. Nothing dangerous. Only the earth answering back. Arg leaned against the railing, feeling the resonance underfoot. "I keep thinking she'll lift any second." "She could," Iona admitted. "But she shouldn't. Not yet. The Arkyn network is stabilizing. Tearing free now might fracture the link your son created." "So she's anchored?"
"More accurately, rooted, like a tree finding new soil."
Kara's gaze followed the glowing veins snaking across the valley floor.
"Then maybe that's what we all are now."
The day stretched quiet and bright. Elves from the lower terraces came to stare at the lights running through the ground. Dwarves climbed the ridge paths to see whether their old forges glowed again. They whispered that the heart of the world had turned its face back toward them. Mark stayed in the hangar, half mechanic, half watchman. He tightened conduits, tested fluid seals, anything to keep his hands busy. He didn't trust peace to last.
"You're anxious,"
Iona observed. He snorted.
Didn't know you monitored moods.
"Your respiration increases whenever readings are stable. That usually indicates fear of good news."
Kara looked up from the console.
"She's right, you know."
I'll start believing in peace when it stops surprising me.
"Then prepare for disappointment," Iona said. "Peace rarely announces itself."
Evening settled. Ark stood by the viewport watching the last sunlight fade from the peaks. The Arkyn lines dimmed with the dusk. Yet the widow kept glowing, an ember against the dark. Kara joined him again, her voice quiet.
"Do you think he understands what he's done?"
Ark shook his head.
He's his mother's son. He'll understand it when he's already halfway through it.
She just smiled faintly.
"And you?"
I just keep the lights on.
"Correction," Iona interjected, softer than before. "You keep the flame alive."
For once, Ark didn't argue. Far above, snow rolled from the ridges where Kaelric's group began their descent. The faint Arkyn glow marked the trail ahead, a silent invitation home. In the valley below, the widow's core pulsed once, slow and deep, like a beacon calling them forward. Iona's voice drifted through the still air of the hangar.
"Incoming resonance confirmed. Multiple signatures. He's coming."
Ark exhaled, almost smiling.
Then we'd best make room.
Kara nodded, eyes shining.
"For the first time in years, I think we're ready."
The widow's lights brightened, matching her heartbeat to the mountains, to the forge, to the footsteps still miles away. Chapter 31. Echoes Through Stone. The mountains had gone quiet again. Too quiet. For days the wind had howled through the passes, scouring stone and ice until it stripped sound from the world. Now, as Kaelric and the others picked their way down the fractured slope, even the snow seemed to listen. He could feel it beneath the surface, that same pulse, deep and steady. It wasn't thunder or quake. It was rhythm. Life. Risa stopped ahead, planting her boot hard on the crusted snow.
"That feeling again,"
she muttered, frowning toward the horizon.
"Like the ground's got a heart?"
Kaelric nodded.
"It does."
Tovin turned toward them, puzzled. You just spoke in common. Kaelric blinked.
I did?
Risa tilted her head.
Sounded like Durvok to me.
Crick scratched behind one ear.
And I heard Skitter speak, clear as a bell.
For a heartbeat, they all stared at one another, the echo of their words still hanging in the thin air. The mountain seemed to hum in reply. Tovin murmured, almost to himself, "The Arkyn carries meaning, not words." Risa shivered.
Then it's the world translating for us?
Kaelric didn't correct them. He only felt the pulse through his chest, his heartbeat overlapping the mountains, and realized that every note of their speech matched that rhythm exactly. Tovin shaded his eyes from the morning glare. "Look, down the ridge." They turned. Below them, the gray sweep of rock and frost shimmered with thin blue veins, lines of Arkyn running through cracks like molten rivers frozen mid-flow. They moved, pulsing faintly toward the valley in measured beats. Risa whispered, "By the three faces!" Grass grunted. "Not ghosts, not trick or light. Real." Crix crouched, claws scraping ice, his eyes reflecting the glow.
We're not breathing again.
Kaelric said nothing at first. He only watched the rhythm and matched his breathing to it. Inhale, exhale, the same steady pace as the pulse. The hammer at his belt warmed faintly. Not burning, but alive. It vibrated once, and he felt a second heartbeat that wasn't his own. When he spoke, his voice sounded distant even to himself.
They're alive.
Tovin looked at him sharply. "Who?"
My parents.
Kaelric's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon.
I can feel them through it.
The others traded uneasy glances. None of them argued. By midday, they reached the ledge overlooking the western cliffs. The wind had carried away much of the loose snow, revealing black stone streaked with glowing fissures. The light wasn't chaotic now. It flowed in perfect rhythm, each surge a whisper of harmony. Risa crouched to study the rock.
Never seen Arkyn act like this. Feels organized. It's connected, Kaelric said quietly. Every line leads somewhere, to the valley. Then that's where we're going, Risa said, tightening the strap on her pack.
Grax adjusted his belt and grumbled. Valley full of elves, dwarfs, fear. Orcs not welcome. Kaelric looked back at him.
They'll learn to be.
Crick snorted.
You think that easy?
Kaelric smiled faintly.
Nothing about this has been easy, but they'll listen.
Risa studied him, brows furrowing.
How can you be so sure?
He touched the hammer's head gently, feeling it hum under his fingers.
Because the mountain already did.
As evening crept in, they stopped beneath a stone overhang to rest, the glow of the Arkyn veins illuminating the cavern walls, painting their faces in pale blue. Tovin sat near the entrance, eyes closed, listening to the vibration through the floor. The resonance follows us. It's as if the mountain is carrying us down. Kaelric looked toward the open path ahead.
It is.
He could feel more now, not just the pulse beneath the ground, but threads of thought and memory echoing through it. A whisper that wasn't language but meaning. Home. He almost said it aloud. Instead, he whispered softly in Durvok, the tongue of stone and forge, one Ressa would understand.
Barunka. Home calling.
Risa turned sharply, eyes wide.
Where'd you hear that word?
Kaelric blinked.
It just came.
She studied him for a long moment, then looked away.
Aye, that's what the old miners used to say, back when the veins called them back.
Later, when the others slept, Kaelric sat awake beside the glowing fissure. The hammer rested across his knees, humming faintly. He stared into the light until the shapes blurred, veins becoming rivers, rivers becoming the paths between stars. Somewhere in that flow he sensed a spark far below, deeper than the valley, where the widow waited. He heard a whisper through the resonance, not in words, but in tone. A voice he knew.
Steady, boy. Follow it home.
Ark's voice, faint, rough, threaded through light and stone. Kaelric smiled to the dark. Aye, old man, I'm coming. The hammer pulsed once as if in answer. The path narrowed and bent into the mountain's ribs, a slate-gray corridor chiseled by old hands and older water. Frost glazed the ceiling like glass. Where the Arkyn veins crossed the rock, the frost receded to bare stone, as if the world's warmth pressed two fingers against its own pulse. Risa tested each step with the heel of her boot. Mind the edge. Shelf's been slipping since the thaw. Crix went to all four without being asked, tail flickering for balance. It's fine. Fall not fine. Grask took the rear, a shadow with tusks.
I'll catch what doesn't fall.
Catch me and I'll haunt you,
Risa said, but her grin showed she believed him. The tunnel dog-legged. Wind pushed through a throat of broken masonry, carrying a scent Kaelric could not mistake. Oil, heat, the faint iron tang of dwarven forges roaring miles away. The hammer hummed in approval. He sat his palm to the wall and felt the answer travel up his bones. They came to a carved lintel, dropped askew across the path. Old Durvak eroded thin. Footing is trust. Trust the stone. Risa's fingers traced the letters. Aye, old guild script, pre-war. This old side cut was a runner route. All teams moving quick when a vein started singing. Tovin's gaze climbed the lintel face, noting the chisel order, the small faults. The stone cutters laid the weight with intention. See how the stress flees to the corners? They meant this passage to flex, not fail. Then let's flex, Kaelric ducked under, leading them through. The floor pitched down into a gallery ribbed like the inside of a bell. Sound traveled strangely here. One breath multiplied and returned as a hush. The Arkyn veins drew together along the far wall, converging into a braid of blue that pulsed towards the valley. In that light, the dust glittered as though sprinkled with ground glass. Crix churred low. Hear that? Not song, not wind. Hurt. Risa swallowed. I hear it. A beat, then softer to herself. Been a long while since I did. They moved on. Hours folded into each other. The mountain measured time in pulses, not minutes, and so did they. Water dripped somewhere unseen. The drops landed in tempo with the Arkyn thrum, as though even the melt had learned the rhythm. They reached a split where the old cart rails had been yanked from the floor and stacked against a wall. Risa crouched, brushed snow, and found a dwarven tally scratched along the base stone. Short, short, long, short, short, long. Evac marks, she said. When the war sealed the upper forges, crews took the rails and ran. This was the last stop before the valley break. Grask kneaded a fist against the rock, listening with his knuckles.
Down left, safe. Down right, deep.
Crix pointed his narrow chin toward the down left side.
Smell of smoke that way. Fresh.
Tovin's brows rose. Then the forges are truly lit again. Kaelric stood between the two mouths, the hammer warm as coal on his hip. The down right path breathed cold and old. The down left carried heat, voices, the faintest tremor of tools. The choice wasn't a choice. Left, he said. Homeward. They took the left. The tunnel widened into chambers strung like beads. Each chamber held a memory, a bracket for a lantern half melted, a spill of slag cooled to swirls, a child's carved stone bird left on a beam and polished by 100 passing hands. Risa gathered the bird without comment and pressed it into Kaelric's palm. He tucked it in his satchel beside the map scrap that no longer existed anywhere but in his head. They ate on the move, hard bread, dried roots, jerky. No one complained about taste. Hunger and light do the same work when you're pointed the right way. A low tremor rolled through the floor, steady, not dangerous. Tovin listened. Not collapse, cadence. Engines, Kaelric said before he thought to soften it. His breath shortened a fraction. Risa glanced sideways at him. Engines, is it? He hummed. Not roaring, humming, like a forge bellows before the first strike. Risa hopped, satisfied. And the old widow keeps her breath. Grask made a pleasant sound deep in his chest.
Skyship, woman stone strong.
Widow, Crix repeated, trying the shape of the word, and cackled.
Old ship, do fire.
At the next bend, the ceiling sank low, forcing them into a crawl. The rock here was warm enough to fog their breath. The Arkyn vein in the left wall ran thick and slow, like a river under ice. Kaelric flattened his palm to it. For an instant, he felt proximity like touch across a great distance. His mother's steady mind, his father's rough patience. A third tone he knew as surely as his own heartbeat. Wry, precise, amused. He drew back as if shocked, then smiled despite the ache in his shoulders. Closer, he whispered. Risa's face smudged with dust, tilted an eyebrow.
You saying that to the tunnel, or to me?
To both, he said, and kept moving. They crawled out into a vault cut by a fissure you could have ridden a mine mule through. Starlight slanted down from somewhere far above, the valley's first breath. It painted the Arkyn braid a shade between river and lightning. Tovin stood still a long time, head lifted, eyes closed. Hear that?
What? Risa asked. My knees?
The ground. It's sharing. He searched for the word. It doesn't feel like our weight alone anymore. Kaelric let his hand fall to the hammer's neck. Because it isn't. Risa peered into the fissure.
We're near the outer layers. Oh, the Grishas. If they've not rotted out, we can make the valley by moonrise.
Moon, Crix said with a relish, the word bright as a coin in his mouth.
Moon good.
Grass clapped the goblins back gently.
We go.
The ladders still held. They descended in spells, taking turns with the packs, feeling each rung as if it were the last true thing in the world. Risa called out an old miner's cadence.
And foot, and foot.
And the others fell into it until it wasn't a call at all, but a comfort. Kaelric noticed how the cadence matched the Arkyn pulse, and how his breath did too. How every small fear slid into the rhythm and dissolved like salt in warm water. Halfway down, Crix paused and tipped his head, ears pricked. What is it? Tovin asked. The goblin squinted, puzzling the shape that floated to him on air.
Voices? Many. Not fight.
Risa blinked.
Bless the bellows. If they're singing this time of evening, there's breath left in the forges.
Grass grumbled, satisfied.
Home.
Kaelric shut his eyes. For a heartbeat, he let the ladder's sway carry him, a pendulum counting the last measures between mountain and valley. He didn't speak the word that lay at the back of his throat. He didn't need to. The mountain spoke it for him in every rung. They reached the bottom just as the last light drained from the cleft. The exit passage here had been widened recently. Fresh tool marks, chips too bright to be old. A pair of small, careful cairns flanked the opening, one built with smooth river stone, the other with squared forged scraps stacked like runes. Elven hands, dwarven hands, both. Risa smiled without showing teeth. They've been working together. Or remembering how, Tovin said. The passage bowed once and spat them into air so clean it tasted like snowmelt. The valley lay ahead in soft relief, the Arkyn lines threading it end to end, far down the slope, tucked into the mountain's hollow like a heart after the rib cage closes. The widow glowed, quiet, patient, awake. The hammer warmed against Kaelric's thigh and chimed once. No sound, just a shared understanding in the bone. Down, he said. No one argued. They started for the switchbacks, 5 figures cut small against the ribs of a world that had relearned how to breathe. Behind them, somewhere up in the dark, the relay gave a single slow pulse, like a parent checking on a child who no longer needed watching and still went. Chapter 32. The Path Rekindled. The lower caverns were warm, not with the heat of magma or forge, but with the breath of something vast moving slow beneath the stone. The Arkyn veins glowed in winding braids along the walls, shedding a light that shimmered through the wet air. Every droplet that fell carried the faint blue sheen, and when it touched the ground, it sang. Risa's voice broke the silence. Hell's below. I could live down here again. Grask gave a deep grunt. Stone talk good. Stone honest. Tovin smiled faintly. You both sound like you're hearing a hymn. Risa ran a calloused hand over the smooth curve of the wall. Aye, a hymn that remembers my people better than we do. Kaelric said nothing. The glow was brighter ahead, where the tunnels widened into an anchored hall. He could feel the hammer responding even before he saw it. A quiet vibration that hummed through the air like a voice singing from a great distance. They stepped inside. The chamber was vast, ribbed stone and carved pillars half swallowed by centuries of dust. Between each column ran a band of runes, alternating patterns of dwarven cut and elven script. Sprawling upwards toward the ceiling were veins of Arkyn merged like constellations. Risa stopped dead. Durvak work, she whispered. But that script? Larian, Tovin finished. Old dialect. Pre-schism. I thought the last of these halls were lost. Kaelric drifted closer to the central wall. His hand hovered an inch above the runes, and they flared softly. The light following his movement like breath fogging glass. Risa stared. They're reacting to you. I'm not doing anything. Aye, well, she said. I seem to think that you are. He leaned closer, tracing the patterns with his eyes. Each line flowed seamlessly into the next. Elven curves tightening into dwarven geometry, then back again. Not 2 scripts competing, but one language written in 2 hands. He murmured half to himself. Strength shared is strength eternal. The moment he spoke, the runes pulsed with a golden white gleam, and the chamber filled with the low hum of harmonics, the same tone that had carried them through the mountain. Tovin took a step back, astonished. You read it? I heard it, Kaelric said. The stone said it first. Risa blinked at him. That weren't common, lad, nor Durvak, nor any tongue I know. He turned, the glow reflecting in his eyes. It wasn't, but you understood me, didn't you? They exchanged glances, confusion and dawning realization mixing like 2 colors in water. I heard it plain as day, Risa admitted. Like you spoke Durvak clean. Tovin nodded slowly. And I heard a Larian. Crix tilted his head, eyes glinting. I hear Skitter speak. You all sound wrong, but right. Kaelric's pulse matched the hum of the chamber. It's not me.
It's the Arkyn. It's using me to speak to all of you.
Risa folded her arms, half proud, half unnerved.
So the lad's a bloody translator now. That's a new trick.
Tovin's expression softened.
Not a trick, a gift. The kind we've forgotten how to accept.
Grask's tusks lifted in what might have been a smile.
Gift or curse, both heavy.
Kaelric nodded.
Then we carry it together.
They moved deeper through the hall, past murals etched in fading color, scenes of dwarves and elves working side by side, filling the walls. Shared forges, shared fields, a time when Arkyn-lit was the heartbeat of both peoples. Tovin traced one of the frescoes, voice quiet.
We called them myths, the union guilds. Thought they were metaphors for peace that never truly was.
Maybe not myths, Kaelric said, eyes following the mural. Maybe memory.
Risa scoffed softly. Aye, and maybe pigs brought wings. Still nice to think we weren't always passing each other's skulls for ore veins. Crix climbed up a half-fallen column, dangling from a ledge.
Others fighting, others hiding. And for what? Look what we lost.
His tone surprised them all. It wasn't sharp or mocking, just small. Risa looked up at him.
What are you saying, Runt?
He shrugged, eyes on the mural.
Maybe peace worth fighting for. Maybe fighting not.
Grask rumbled in agreement, laying a massive hand on the goblin's shoulder as he passed.
Wise words from small mouth.
Crix grinned.
First time anyone say that.
The group paused at the hall's far end, where the ruins thinned and a faint draft carried the scent of cold earth. The passage ahead led down, toward the valley, toward Stonebrook. Kaelric looked back once at the chamber, watching the runes fade to a quiet pulse. The hammer warmed against his hip, content, as though it too remembered. He said softly,
It's not just the world waking up, it's remembering what it was.
Risa met his gaze.
Then maybe it's time we did the same.
The hum followed them as they stared down the last tunnel. No longer separate voices, but one chord, mountain, hammer, hearts, all in time. The tunnel narrowed until the five of them had to walk single file, their footfalls echoing softly against the stone. The Arkyn glowed that had guided them for miles dimmed to a whisper under the rock, as though urging them toward the open world waiting beyond. Risa led with her lamp raised high.
Feels wrong leaving it behind, she muttered. Like walking out a song half-song.
Tovin's reply was quiet.
Every song ends, Risa. The echo is what teaches the next verse.
Crix gave a small snort.
Echoes don't feel bellies.
Grask's hand rested on the goblin's shoulder to steady him on the wet slope.
But they fill hearts, different hunger.
Kaelric said nothing. The air itself seemed to vibrate around him, gentle, constant, each breath carrying the same steady rhythm that had guided them through the halls of stone. It was his heartbeat now, and the mountains, and something greater in between. They came at last to the mouth of the cavern. Cold air rolled in, sharp with pine and snow. Beyond the arch lay the valley. Stonebrook stretched below them, its outlines softened by night and distance. The river flashed like liquid glass where it met the first fingers of dawn, and the faint blue tracery of Arkyn veins pulsed through the fields and homes, alive again, but gentle now, not blinding. Risa let out a slow breath.
By the three, she's breathing.
Tovin stepped beside her.
The light's steadier than before, balanced.
Crix crouched near the edge, eyes wide.
Pretty, he whispered,
as if the word itself might shatter the view. Grask folded his arms, jaw set.
Pretty can turn quick.
Kaelric nodded.
Aye, that's why we go careful.
He sank to one knee, pressing his palm to the cold rock. The Arkyn vein beneath answered with a faint warmth, a quiet welcome. From deep below, the hum of the Dust Widow traveled through the stone, a heartbeat answering his own.
They're alive down there, he murmured. The ship. My parents.
Reese's eyes softened.
Then best we don't keep 'em waiting.
Tovin smiled faintly. At first light, we walk. They built a small fire sheltered by the cliff and waited out the night's last hours. No one slept. They spoke little, saving what words they had for the morning. When dawn broke, pale and clean, Kaelric stood. The first ray struck the hammer at his side, and it caught the light as if remembering something older than the sun itself. He looked to his companions, the dwarf with soot on her cheek, the elf whose calm masked a quiet awe, the orc whose strength was now tempered with patience, and the goblin still squinting at the brightness like it was an unfamiliar treasure.
We faced them together, Kaelric said.
Risa gave a grunt that was half laugh.
Aye, together.
Tovin inclined his head. The path is ours to walk. Grass grumbled assent. Stone remembers. Crix flicked his coin into the air and caught it again.
Didn't that see you folks do?
The five of them turned their eyes toward the valley. The light climbed higher, touching the roofs of Stonebrook, the river bend, and the distant bulk of the Dust Widow where she rested in her mountain cradle. The hum followed the sunrise, low and even. Kaelric felt it in his bones, an answer, a promise, and a warning all at once. He exhaled.
It's time.
Chapter 33. The Long Descent. The ridge still held the night. Only the eastern sky showed the promise of light. A pale seam stretched thin across the peaks. Frost clung to the stones where the Arkan veins had gone dark again, resting after their long awakening. Kaelric sat apart from the others, back to the wind, staring down at the faint lines of the valley. From here, the roofs of Stonebrook looked like shards of slates scattered along the river bend, small and fragile against the mountain's weight. He'd thought the sight would bring peace. It didn't. Behind him, the fire coughed as Reza fed it the last of their kindling.
You're staring holes through the dark again, lad, she said. Won't change what's waiting below. I know. Then stop trying to see the end before you start the walk.
Kaelric turned toward her.
Would you rather I go blind?
Risa grinned through the steam of her breath.
Blind men don't trip over what they fear.
Tovin chuckled from his bedroll. Spoken like every dwarven philosopher I've ever argued with.
Don't flatter me, elf. I'm just tired of him brooding.
Kaelric smiled faintly and looked at the others.
When the sun comes, we go down. I'll speak first. If they don't listen...
They will, Tovin said quietly. The Arkyn hasn't woken for a liar.
Maybe not, Kaelric said. But it's woken plenty of fools.
That drew a soft laugh from Crix, perched on a boulder, knees tucked to his chest.
They are safe. Fools live longer.
Grass grumbled a sound that might have been amusement. Not always. Silence took them again, gentler this time. The fire burned low. Its glow painted the curve of their faces, 5 shadows bound by a single hum just beyond hearing. Kaelric closed his eyes and let the sound find him. The slow pulse of the widow under the valley, the answering rhythm in his chest. It felt like being called home and warned away in some breath. When the quiet had stretched too far, Tovin spoke. You haven't asked us why we follow you. Kaelric opened his eyes.
I thought it was obvious.
Obvious is rarely true. Risa shifted, poked the fire.
He's right. Might be time you heard it plain.
Kaelric waited. Risa's voice came first, rough and honest.
I followed because the forge was dying. Couldn't stand the sound of me hammer when it didn't answer me back. Then the mountain started humming. Again. And if you were standing at the heart of it, I figured if I stayed close, I might learn why.
Tovin spoke next, softer. I followed you
because I saw what the Arkyn did to you, and didn't turn away. Every legend says that power devours. You listened instead. That deserves witness.
Crix toyed with his coin, eyes flicking between them. I followed because tunnels were safer than fields. An orc walked slow enough to hide behind. But now, he paused, as if tasting the thought. Now I follow because maybe the world's changing, and I want to see where it tilts. Grask turned the hammer's reflection over in his eye before he spoke.
Plan gone, honor gone. But Forge sing, again. I hear song. I walk.
Their words hung in the cold air until Risa broke it with a low whistle. Well, there you have it, lad. 4 good reasons and not one of 'em sane. Kaelric smiled at her. Then I'm in good company. The first light crept over the peaks. It caught on Risa's braids, glinted along Tovin's staff, warmed the gray of Grask's tusks, and the pale green of Crix's eyes. Kaelric rose, brushing frost from his cloak. Pack up, he said. We'll meet whatever waits in the open. Risa stamped out the last ember. Aye, best face trouble before it finds a seat. The descent began slow, each step echoing off the frozen stone. Mist rose from the valley, curling like breath over water. With every turn of the switchbacks, the hum of the widow grew clearer, steady, patient, like a heartbeat laid beneath the earth. Tovin glanced up once, listening.
She's waiting.
Kaelric nodded. So is the world. Risa looked at him sidelong. You think they'll welcome us? I think, Kaelric said, they'll decide. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the 5 were halfway down the slopes. Birds rose from the pines below, startled by light. The Arkyn veins shimmered faintly under the soil, leading toward the valley floor like threads of memory pulling them home. Crix murmured, Feels like we're walking inside a song again. Then keep the beat, Risa said. We'll need it. The widow's hum answered through the stone, a deep, patient note that carried all the way to their bones. None of them spoke after that. Words would have been too small. They just walked, down toward the valley, toward the light, toward whatever waited when the song changed key. Mist held to the lower switchbacks like wool. Sunlight slid down the opposite face and turned the river into a blade. The Arkyn lines underfoot kept their soft pulse, brightening only when the path tightened or the stones sloped treacherous, warning set by a world that had finally decided to look after its own. Risa lifted a hand. Hold! They crouched behind a spur of rock. Below, on the first terrace above the fields, lanterns bobbed in a slow, practiced rhythm. A palisade line glimmered where the Arkyn dust had settled in grain of wood. Figures moved along it, short, broad-shouldered with the set of dwarves, tall, narrow ones with elven ease.
Posts are up, Tovin murmured. Orderly, not panicked.
Orderly and panicked looked the same from far away, Risa said. Listen! They did. Not alarm bells, work bells. A gate team oiling hinges, someone hauling a chain with enough care that it didn't sing. The village was braced, not bristling. Crix sniffed, ears pricked. Hot iron, boiled leather, bread. Grask nodded once, pleased by facts that smelled like living.
No blood smell. Good.
Kaelric eased forward until he could see the lower trail where it split toward the mill. Fresh boot marks scalloped the damp earth. Some doubled back, scouts sent and called home. The mountain's hum braided quietly with the widow's, 2 notes of the same chord, steady under everything. We stay visible, he said. Hands where they can see them, no sudden moves. Risa grunted. And no speeches till we're asked for one. Agreed. They came out of the cover as 5 travelers, not a war band, packs cinched, the hammer riding Kaelric's hip like a tool, not a threat. The path opened to a long slope of scrub where the wind could get its teeth into them, and the watchers could count with both eyes. That was the point. At the next bend, the Arkyn vein along the ditch brightened, just a shade, and forked, its thinner threads running under Grask's step and Crix's by habit now. Neither looked down. Both felt it. Risa noticed and said nothing. Tovin did too, and added a quiet breath of thanks in Illyrian, the kind that leaves no echo.
Movement, Risa said. Left of the mill.
A trio detached from the fence line and made for the lower watch fur. 2 dwarves in quilted jerkins with forge scorched on their sleeves, and an elf whose cloak carried river green threads. Their pace was deliberate. One of the dwarves waved, a flat-palmed, practical greeting that also said, "Stop there." Kaelric stopped 20 paces short of the spur, close enough for faces, far enough for nerves. He lifted his hands, empty, palms out.
"Morning,"
he called, plain and even. The taller dwarf measured them with a smith's eye. "You're the ones from the ridge?" Risa answered in Dervak, the rhythm older than her own voice.
"Aye, trail's clean behind us. No sign of rockfall."
The dwarf mouth twitched. "You sound like my mother."
"No, if she taught you manners."
"She did?
"And to ask questions."
His gaze slid to Grask and Crix. Not hostile, not welcoming. "Your friends?"
"Mine," Kaelric said. "Under my word."
The elf's eyes narrowed, listening, not to words, but to the air around them.
"Do you feel it?"
he asked the dwarves without looking away.
"The hum."
"Been feeling it since yesterday," the shorter dwarf muttered. "Keeps the aches off me knuckles. Could do without the mystery." "Better a mystery than a funeral," his fellow replied. Kaelric didn't press. He let the mountain's rhythm find his breath. Let his words carry the weight of that steadiness without tripping into anything performative.
"We're headed for the square," he said. "No trouble meant."
"None wanted," the taller dwarf said. His tone softened a notch. "We'll walk you in as far as the lower posts. After that, the council says."
"Council says,"
Risa echoed, unsurprised. The elf glanced at the hammer where it caught a strand of sun. "That tool," he said to Kaelric. "Keep it quiet."
"It already is,"
Kaelric answered. They started again, the 3 from the spur falling in at the neighborly distance, near enough to count breaths, far enough to honor space. The slope eased to hard-packed earth. Frost broke underfoot with a soft snap. From the fields, a pair of women looked up from mending a fence, hands pausing but not dropping the work. One raised her chin to Risa in recognition. Risa returned it, spare as a nod at an anvil. Crix walked very straight, as if balancing a bowl on his head. Grask kept his hands open and empty, palms forward, when eyes found him. No one reached for anything. At the notch, where the road bent between 2 old stone markers, Kaelric slowed. The Arkyn vein that had shadowed the path swelled beneath the soil and pressed a warmth into his soles. One sure beat, then another. He felt the widow answer from her cradle with that same 2-note phrase, a greeting and a warning all in one.
"Here," he said.
Risa looked sideways.
"Here what?" "Line," he said. "Old one."
He tapped the marker stone with 2 fingers. Elven script worn shallow shared the face with Dervak cuts that still bit deeper. Hold fast. Pass fair. Tovin's mouth curved. "It remembers."
"So do we,"
Kaelric said. They didn't step across yet. The watch road ahead led down to the first palisade, and the place where choices cost more. The lanterns on the post burned steady. The square beyond held its breath. The taller dwarf from the spur pointed to a flat of rock off the road. "Wait there," he said. "We'll send word ahead. Better to come with names than shadows."
"Fair," Risa said.
They moved to the rock and stood where the valley could see them, neither entertaining nor retreating. The wind carried the hammer's faint metal scent and the widow's slow hum. knitting the two into one patient note under the morning. Crix rolled his coin across his knuckles without dropping it once. Grask watched the palisade as a mountain watches weather. Tovin settled his staff against his shoulder and looked like a man who'd decided, finally, to hope. Risa tucked stray hair back under her scarf and set her boots as if for a long walk. Kaelric faced the road, palms open still, and let the rhythm keep his breathing even. "Whatever comes," he said, not loud. "Together?" "Together." "Together." Crix showed a small, sharp grin. "Together." And they waited at the old line, while the village measured the distance between fear and welcome, and the hum from the ship in the mountain kept the beat. Chapter 34. Ash in the Streets. The gates of Stonebrook opened under torchlight and fear. They were heavy things, oaken timbers banded in bronze, carved with old runes meant to keep sickness and strife outside the walls. Tonight those runes flickered as if uncertain whom to protect. A wind slid down from the Greyspines, cold and smelling faintly of ash and thawed iron. It followed Kaelric's party through the gate like a ghost that refused to stay behind. 3 escorts, 2 dwarves and an elf, walked ahead with their lanterns swaying. The lamps cast warped halos across the damp stones, catching the veins of Arkyn that pulsed beneath the street, like restless veins of fire. Risa trudged just behind them, her axe slung across her back. Tovin's robes brushed the cobbles, its hem still stained from cave dust. Grask and Crix kept close together, shoulders hunched, their eyes darting from shadow to window. Kaelric walked at the center, every step pulling his chest tighter. He had pictured this moment during their descent, the first sight of home, the hum of the widow beneath the valley. But he hadn't imagined the silence. Not the kind born of peace, but the taut silence of people waiting to see if they needed to fight. Windows cracked open along the forge row. Lanterns flared, throwing thin blades of light across the street. Dwarves leaned on door frames with hammers still in hand. Elves stood on thresholds with staffs, whose tips began to shimmer. Stonebrook had always been a blend of both peoples, bound by shared conflict and caution. But in this moment, old suspicions moved under their skin like splinters. Risa noticed first. "They've heard," she muttered. "Word's always quicker than feet." Kaelric gave a short nod. "They see 2 strangers and fill the gaps themselves." A growl rolled low from Grask's throat. "They stare if teeth mean hunger." "They don't know different yet," Kaelric answered quietly, not sure whether the orc understood every word. "We'll show them." Crix's sharp voice came from somewhere near his elbow, half whisper, half sneer. "No one show Goblin. Goblin not worth showing." Risa shot him a look. "Hush now. Best keep your tongue till we've ground out the sparks." They rounded the last bend, and the heart of Stonebrook lay before them. The square, built of interlocking slate rings by workshops and the shrine of the 3 faces. Its fountain, once dry, now glowed faintly from Arkyn seeping through cracks in the basin. The sight should have stirred pride. Instead, the crowd that filled the square stiffened at the newcomers. Someone called out, sharp with disbelief, "By the forges, that's an orc!" Another voice rose behind it. "And a goblin at his heels! Gods preserve us!" A ripple went through the crowd. Tools were gripped tighter. Boots shifted. A hammer lifted slightly as if measuring distance to a threat. The 3 escorts hesitated. The elf tried to speak above the noise. "Safe passage by order of the gate," but the words were swallowed by fear. A stone clattered from someone's palm. Not thrown yet, just dropped. The sound hit like a spark in dry tinder. Grask straightened to his full height, shoulders broad as the doorposts, and a deep note rumbled from his chest. A warning born of instinct, not anger. The crowd recoiled half a step. Crix hissed softly, the sound like a blade drawn against itself. Tovin's hand touched Kaelric's sleeve.
If you don't still this, we'll have blood in the streets.
Kaelric stepped forward. Wait! The word carried farther than he expected, aided by something beneath his voice, a resonance that wasn't entirely his own. The Arkyn veins brightened underfoot, matching his pulse. We came from the mountain, he said, raising both hands empty. No one here seeks harm. These are my companions, not my captors. The murmur faltered, but didn't die. A dwarven smith, beard bound in copper rings, pushed to the front. You bring them into our hearth, boy, and call it peace? What's next? Trolls at the shrine? Risa planted her axe blade down between them. Mind your tongue, Corin Sanwaslate. He's done more for you than the High Hammers these 10 years past. A younger dwarf barked from the edge. He's a year shy of you and twice your trouble. Look at what he drags behind him. Kaelric met their eyes, one by one. He could feel Grask's breath behind him, hear Crix's muttering prayers and skitter speak. Every part of him wanted to shout that the world was changing, that the mountain had spoken, but he knew they wouldn't hear it yet. Fear deafened faster than stone. Then the sound that cut through all others wasn't a shout, but a voice he'd known since before he had words. Enough! Argarston stepped from the mouth of his forge, light spilling behind him in ribbons of red and gold. His coat unfastened, hair grayed and streaked with soot, but the strength in his stance hadn't dimmed. The crowd turned as one, and the noise fell away like dust shaken from a beam. He walked to the center of the square, stopping beside his son. You'd raise steel against the ones who woke the valley's heart, he said. You'd curse the hands that kept the mountain from crushing us all. The smith Corin faltered. Arg, you saw what's with him. I see who's with him, Arg said, voice low, iron steady. And I see the mountain glowing again after 15 dead years. That's enough for me. The Arkyn light under the square flared once, soft blue washing over the cobbles and fading. No one breathed. For a heartbeat, even the wind seemed to wait. Kaelric felt the eyes on him, some suspicious, some fearful, some simply weary. He took a breath. We didn't bring war, he said quietly. The mountain woke. It remembers us, all of us. The light you see isn't a curse. It's life returning. The child wriggled free from her mother's grip and knelt to touch the stone. It's warm, she whispered, small voice bright against the hush. The mother pulled her back but didn't scold. The tone of the crowd shifted, confusion dulling into uncertain awe. A few dwarves lowered their hammers. The elves dimmed their staffs. Risa's shoulders dropped a fraction, tension bleeding out through her breath. From somewhere near the well, a lone voice asked, And what if the light turns hot again? What if it burns? Kaelric met the speaker's eyes. Then we cool it together. We don't run from it this time. A murmur rippled, half agreement, half doubt. But no one raised a weapon. Arg's presence anchored them all, his hand resting on the haft of his old tool belt like a reminder that work, not war, was what bound this place. The bell at the shrine tolled once, deep and resonant, rolling through the air like the thunder softened by distance. The note hung, then faded into the hiss of the forges. Tovin inclined his head. The council calls. Risa gave a wry snort. About time. Kaelric looked to his father. Arg nodded once. You'll answer their questions. Speak plain. I will. Good, Arg said. And when they ask who stands with you, don't forget what you just showed them. Kaelric managed a small smile. Together, he said. Risa touched his arm. Together? She echoed. Tovin followed. Together. Grass grumbled the word in his own tongue, deep and rough. Crix only clicked his teeth once. Agreement enough. They began to walk toward the shrine. The crowd parted slowly, grudgingly. The gap widened just enough to let them pass. Some watched in silence. Others bowed their heads out of respect or caution. The torches along the street dimmed as they went, replaced by the faint bluish glow rising from the stones themselves. Arg stood where they left him, the forge light at his back, eyes fixed on the path to the shrine. Kara appeared at the door of their home a few houses down, drawn by the commotion. Their gazes met briefly. No words, only understanding. The bell tolled again. Kaelric's party reached the foot of the shrine steps. The great doors stood closed, carved with 3 faces: creation, balance, memory, each catching a different hue of Arkyn-lit. The escorts stopped short and bowed their heads, leaving the 5 of them alone before the council hall. Kaelric looked once over his shoulder. The villagers watched from the square, silent, uncertain, but no longer ready to strike. He saw his father still standing there, arms folded, a solitary figure outlined in the orange breath of the forge. Arg raised a hand, half farewell, half warning, and Kaelric answered with a nod. The final bell note rolled through the valley, mingling with another sound that only he seemed to hear, the distant hum of the widow resonating in answer, deep beneath the earth, patient and alive. He placed his palm against the shrine door. It was warm. "Let's finish what we started," he said. Together, they stepped forward as the doors began to open. Kaelric spoke without turning. "When we go in, let me speak first." Risa's reply came dry. "Wouldn't do to have the goblin open with a joke." Crick showed his teeth, just a little. "No joke. Later." "Much later," Tovin said, but there was a real smile under it. Grass lowered his chin. "I stand. I do not roar." "Good," Kaelric said. "Then we go as we came." From the street behind, the villager's life began its slow restart. A forge 2 lanes over tested a weak strike, one measured tap, then another. In the gardens, a pair of elves resumed their tending of winter greens. In a doorway, a dwarf counted nails into his palm and found, without knowing why, that he wanted to count them twice. "Kael," Risa said, gentler than her usual, "if they press, keep it plain. Plain saves breaths." "I know," he said. He took his hand from the bronze, lifted it again, let it rest there, weighing the moment the way the smiths weigh a pour. Not by measure alone, but by feel. "Together," he said. "Together?" Risa answered. "Together," Tovin said. Grass grumbled. "Together." Cricks, soft but sure. "Together." The bell's 4th note struck clean, final, not loud. It crossed the square, brushed the forge, ran along the Arkyn lines beneath the cobbles, and came back to the shrine. Steps like a breath returned. Together they began to walk to receive the council's questions and judgment. The end of Part 7 of Void Miner, Seed of Change.